There we go.
There you go.
Okay, welcome everyone to KICLEI meeting, an introduction to KICLEI, and thank you, Gary, for organizing this for the Grey Bruce County. I'm already getting my words mixed up. And thank you everyone for joining from, I see Oxford County and Niagara. I think we invited some people from North Bay, hopefully people from Simcoe and other areas that we've been working in, but we're recording this so people can watch it afterwards. So my name is Maggie Braun, and I am the initiator of what is now called the KICLEI Initiative. This is kicking the International Council out of local environmental initiatives. And we are working really hard to identify, understand, question, and withdraw from global climate policies and programs that are undermining our local autonomy. So this has been a big thing, is just identifying how it is that global agendas are being downloaded and implemented in local councils. And this is something that always fascinated me, as somebody who was watching what was happening at the United Nations level and then seeing the federal level buy into the international organizations' agendas and policies, but then watching them get trickle down and get implemented at the local level, and always kind of thinking that that was being enforced and not recognizing that those policies and programs were being voluntarily adopted and that there was something that we could do about it. So that's where we are today. So I'm going to run through a couple things today. So we're going to look at how councils join and under what pretense are they joining? What are the main organizations involved in bringing this forward at the local level? We'll look at We'll be looking at some specific UN directive programs and the organizations that they're coming from, like the FCM. And we'll look at the impact that it's having on our communities and on our council's local autonomy. And then we're going to zoom in on the council itself. What's happening in that council? And viewing that council as a battleground between the public and international lobbyist groups, and how it is that international lobbyists are pushing their programs at that council level, and what we can do to meet them on that battleground and push back. We're going to look at the impact of 30 years of sustainable development, and so we can have a firm grounding moving forward in what is the basis of our argument. That we can look at their reasoning for doing this and then break that down, but we also want to provide our community and councils with an overview of the negative impact these policies are having on our communities. And then we will go over some of the successes that we'll go over what it is that the successes that we've had and what we can do next, and how you can further engage and be part of this. So that's what I want to go over today, and I'm so glad that you're here. So a couple, I guess, in about 2023, we started gathering back in our hometowns. A lot of us had been involved in standing up for our rights at the federal level, and we met, and our grassroots network of people who were concerned about the direction our country was going in really kind of came together a couple years ago and through the lockdowns. And since that time, we have gone back to our towns and found that, I know for me personally, that Canada is a really big country. The idea of us all coming to Ottawa, for instance, to push back on this big agenda that is taking place all across our country is not as feasible as it is for, say, European countries where they could get to their nation capital in, let's say, 6 to 4 hours at the most. So here we are, spread across the second largest country in the world with a very dispersed population. We're not a highly populated country. And we need to, well, in my opinion, find ways that we can address our nation's problems at that local level where we can come together in our communities. We can pull on a group of dedicated advocates skill set, pull that together and turn that into a community um, a community action plan that can then gather support from the local community and go and advocate for your community's needs at the local level. And so for me, the identification, this revelation that we've discovered with KICLEI, identifying that UN directive programs are coming in from the United Nations, who then in the 1990s created an organization called ICLEI, the International Council on Local Environmental Initiatives, who then came over to Canada and partnered with an organization called the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. This is a big organization for our municipalities. And together, ICLEI and the FCM drafted what became known as Agenda 21 and the documents that were agreed to and signed in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. 2 years later, the FCM again partnered with ICLEI and they launched a program called the Partners for Climate Protection Program. And what we're finding is on our local council's agenda is a lot of action items about net zero or climate action plans or declarations of climate emergency or active transportation plans or 15-minute city planning, and the list goes on, right? So I truly believe that I'm not the only one who can look at my local newspaper or look on the local agenda and read their environmental committee reports or the various reports on the local agenda and can identify what is part of the global agenda and what is a local initiative and start making that distinction. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who sees those things and has something that I would like to say about it and have some concerns about how that agenda is negatively impacting our communities. So that's what we've started to do is we've started to identify those action items and ask questions. And as we did, we kept digging up the Partners for Climate Protection Program, the FCM, and ICLEI. And there's all sorts of other NGOs that are pushing this, but what they seem to be pushing is this 5 milestone. Let me see if I have a slide. 5 milestone climate action plan framework. So not all municipalities are signed up for the PCP program. We're finding over in Renfrew County, they've commissioned a consultant, but they're working through the same 5 milestones in order to draft a community climate action plan. When we look at the C40 cities and other initiatives that are putting out prizes for communities who are participating, what they are looking for are communities and councils and municipalities that are moving through these 5 milestones. So what are they doing? The 5 milestones is where, and I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but essentially they are volunteer. These programs, I'll start by saying this, are completely voluntary. They are not mandated at the municipal level. No municipal council is required to adopt any reduction target like net zero by 2050 or 40% reductions by 2030. Whenever we see anything related to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, anything being implemented at the local level, they are all being done voluntarily, and there is no mandate for them to do that. So that's important. And what they're doing with the Partners for Climate Protection program and all of these programs is they are getting the councils to join voluntarily, telling them that it's free to join. And immediately after, the council starts creating an inventory. So they have to go out and get smart city technology in order to start gathering all of our data, our corporate, so municipal and community data on all of our energy consumption and waste patterns from every sector and every source. So here in Ontario and probably many other provinces, municipalities are required to do, reporting every 5 years on how much they spent on electricity and submit that to the province. That's called the Energy Consumption and Demand Report. But what milestone one of the PCP program does is it looks at everything. So right down to the contents of the waste, how many cars are on the streets, how much gas is being purchased in the community, how much livestock is on the fields. And it's quite an extensive list. On the PCP program website, there is a workbook for the protocol for milestone one. And I encourage everyone to go and skim through that workbook and have a look for yourself so that you will be able to get an idea of the kind of data that is being collected. So milestone two, once they get that information, they call that the baseline inventory. Then they set reduction targets, usually encouraging municipalities to do 40% by 2030 and net zero by 2050. And then they develop an action plan. And all of this costs money because it's done with consultants and everything. And then milestone four is where they get the council to adopt the climate action plan. And then they really get involved in redirecting funds that would otherwise go to local services into mitigation, CO2 mitigation projects. And they kind of trick the councils this whole time. They're tricking the councils by saying that the community wants environmental protection and climate resilience, meaning adaptation. So most communities do support resilient infrastructure that can withstand the 100-year flood, emergency preparedness so that when the big snowstorms come, our communities are ready to handle that. So that falls under climate adaptation, and they're conflating the two, and that becomes a problem. Anyway, I'm way off track. So we can come back and really get into more on the Partners for Climate Protection program in a bit. But milestone 5, lastly, is monitoring and tracking progress. So the program never ends. And when we get to 2025 with this program, there will always be residual emissions, so they say. And it is at that point that they will then recommend our communities install carbon storage plants, and they'll suck the carbon out of the air and store it underground at a cost to us. And none of these programs take into account any of our pre-existing carbon sinks in Canada. So not one tree that existed before they did that baseline inventory is taken into account into these programs. But if you plant a tree afterwards, or if you take land that was previously available for purchase or development or to live on, and turn that into a conservation area and a land trust takes it over, then that counts. So as long as we just keep giving up our land, then we get points. But anyway, so so municipalities, how are they getting roped into this? How is this even happening? We're discovering whether it's KICLEI, becoming a member of KICLEI directly, or becoming a member of the FCM, or becoming a member of the Partners for Climate Protection program. It's all done in 3 simple steps. Basically, each of these organizations and programs has a joining resolution. So if your council hasn't passed that, then they are not being, they don't have these recommendations being downloaded to them. But the second they get this piece of paper in front of them called the Council Resolution to Join, the FCM KICLEI Partners for Climate Protection Program, for instance, and they actually put that in front of the council and the council adopts it, then they get tied into the program, and the program asks them to designate 1 municipal council member and 1 municipal staff to be on the file for the program. And then the program starts communicating directly with them on how to implement this development scheme and climate protocol. So they're telling them when they adopt the program, and this is where my skill set comes in, and I'm sure yours too. When we look at this joining resolution, we find that they're misrepresenting the facts. For instance, they are saying that the program is free when it's free, that it's free to participate. But then as soon as they join the program, it's nothing but cost after cost after cost. And they've never released here they are collecting all this data. You would think that they would have data on how much it has cost over the last 30 years for our communities to implement this program. Where is that data? So that is something I've been asking, and we've asked that in various municipalities and over in Simcoe County. We're starting to get results there, so we'll get into that after. It's worth raising the point. They also say that it's voluntary, and while that is true, that is exactly why we are advocating for more public awareness on the programs. If it's voluntary, we want, then that means that our councils can withdraw from the program. And so what they're doing here, just like the Paris Accord, Canada didn't have to sign that, but they did. They signed on to the Paris Accord, right? That Paris Accord, it only impacts the federal government. The federal government signed up for the Paris Accord. That means that the federal government, its operations and industries that fall under federal jurisdiction are under the Paris Agreement, nothing else. So that is new knowledge to a lot of people. Same with when the federal government passes net zero legislation, and it does have acts that it has passed about net zero. It only applies to their operations and industries under their jurisdiction. Same with our provincial government. If they have passed anything that is Net zero related, it only relates to the provincial government operations and industries under their jurisdiction. It doesn't flow down to us naturally. So what they are doing with these programs is they're trying to slip these resolutions in front of the councils, trick them into adopting them, and essentially getting them to adopt their own mini Paris Accord. Okay, so that joining resolution is what we are aiming to uproot out of our councils, and we need to do that strategically. Where should I go next with this? Voluntarily adopted. Yes. Okay, so once they voluntarily adopt these programs, okay, I'm going to go back to that voluntary adoption. Yeah. So the thing about this is municipalities, what are they? They are directly under the jurisdiction of the provincial government. The federal government doesn't have access to our municipalities from a constitutional standpoint. So, how is it that the federal government and international organizations are bypassing the provincial government and getting into our local councils? They're doing it through the FCM. Okay. So again, KICLEI partnered with the FCM in 1990, 1994. Before that, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities was a prestigious organization, an important organization, an organization that municipal councils across the country needed. It brought local governments together in one national organization so that they could talk about what it is that they were doing locally to make improvements for their community. It gave them a place to share solutions. And when they needed it, they would work together to advocate for federal funding for municipal programs. They would advocate for those programs and get funding from the federal government. Now, what has happened is the FCM has been completely taken over by the United Nations Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 and 50, and UN Sustainable Development Goals, and sustainable development, which is a terrible development scheme for Canada because it drives population growth away from rural small towns and into high density urban areas, which doesn't make sense for the second largest country in the world with a dispersed low population. So now when we look at the FCM, all of its programs, all of them are related to UN sustainable development. And so the federal government funds the Green Municipal Fund. And if municipalities want funding from the federal government, they have to sign up for one of these programs. And essentially, they are being coerced financially to adopt the UN agenda. So, by doing that, they are essentially the federal government and the United Nations and organizations like KICLEI and its corporate sponsors and affiliates have been able to bypass Section 92 of the Canadian Constitution. So, fun stuff. So, what does this mean for our communities? What have we been seeing across the country? a few things that I initially pointed out was its impact on our mobility rights. Here in Peterborough, when I first spoke to this, I spoke to their environmental committee report, which talked about net zero by 2050, targeting our mobility, how COVID-19 lockdowns were good because it lowered our use of our vehicles and our mobility, I suppose. And we should all have concerns about restrictions on private vehicle use. And really, if I have a slide here, when they do the data collection, not here, we see these little graphs being produced in all of our municipalities about what we're using the most energy for. And the biggest chunk of that graph is our private vehicles. So I don't know about you, but I'm lucky to afford a gas-powered vehicle. And I don't think many people can afford EV, EV vehicles and charging stations in their homes and so on. So they're after our mobility. They're after our energy security. And next door to me in Kawartha Lakes and all across Ontario last year, they were pushing for natural gas energy bans. I'm not sure if that happened out where you guys are, but here they were in the council. That one councillor who is signed up for the PCP program as their councillor on file was putting forward motions that in the second largest rural municipality in Ontario, they should restrict natural gas infrastructure. Right? So what does that do for all the people living out in the rural areas, right? And they don't want growth in the small towns and rural areas. The entire premise of sustainable development, when we look back, even before the 90s, we find in the Brundtland Commission reports, when they articulated their land use policy, they said that land should not be treated as an ordinary asset controlled by individuals, and that public control of land use was indispensable for the implementation of their development schemes. So, and we know that their development scheme is sustainable development. And that entire quote, actually, I'm paraphrasing and I left out the middle section, which I haven't learned to quote verbatim, but it's very much rooted in communist ideology. I'll just put it like that. So I don't know about you, small town growth. All I've seen my entire life is our small towns be negatively impacted by whatever it is that was going on. And now I think we've gotten to the root of it. When we started looking at the official plans for Peterborough County, one of the things that we found in that official plan that we brought forward when we did presentations here in Duro-Dummer and in the county was that they were lowering the population growth to the point that in the next 25 years, this was a plan 2050, as they tend to do, that there wouldn't be a township there anymore because it wouldn't have anyone living in it. So we encouraged that council to delay that plan because it was a death sentence to their municipality, and the council agreed with us. So we've had various successes with this work, and that was probably one of our first big ones, was to delay the official plan in Peterborough County, and it is still delayed to this day, and to empower the councils to actually say no to something. Say no, and to remind them that they could, and to show Canadians that the councils, at the end of the day, don't have to take the recommendations of the staff and the bureaucracy. They don't have to do it. They can step into their power at any time and pass a motion to put an end to this stuff. So, of course, when they're driving the population growth away from rural small towns, they're driving it into urban areas where we're seeing an exasperation of crises there with mental health, homelessness, opioid, infrastructure being degraded, affordability crises. The list goes on, right? So this development scheme isn't working for anyone, for rural and urban. And it's who is it working for? It's working for foreign investors, owners of large multinational corporate chains. It's working for corporations involved in emerging energy markets, and so on. It's not working for the average Canadian. It's redirecting our municipal funds and administrative capacity to implement a voluntary UN directive program and development scheme. And that's the key of it, is that this is all voluntary. So we need to show our councils that it's not in their best interest and that the community doesn't want this. And this isn't what we signed up for when we said we wanted environmental protection and climate resilience. That there's a lot to the arguments going on. So it really comes down to what's happening in our local councils. If we want to push back on the global agenda, we want to start paying attention to what's happening in our councils. Who's in control? Who's making the decisions? Our international, so the way I picture it is it's us, the local residents and businesses, against international lobbyists who are using deceit to trick our councillors and pressure our councillors into adopting and moving forward with their agenda, right? The global agenda versus local autonomy and local priorities. Net zero policies versus real, genuine environmental stewardship that we can all get behind and should be, if we do this work, some of the biggest advocates for genuine local environmental stewardship. And then we have astroturf pressure groups, which we're identifying more and more each day. You know, these are organizations like the Climate Caucus that is funded by the federal government and by, again, the federal government funding advocacy groups to co-opt local councillors. This is the Climate Caucus I'm speaking of, and to train activists to push their agenda in local councils. So these astroturf pressure groups versus us, regular local advocates speaking up, pulling our communities together and speaking the truth. And thank God, you know, what I found is, despite not being as well organized as these organizations, not being as well funded by any means as these organizations, being essentially a ragtag network of concerned Canadians, because we are advocating on common sense, we are presenting the truth. We are not overcomplicating our arguments. We are not lying. We are not being deceptive. We are speaking on behalf of our communities. We are trying to get our councils to address the pressing needs of our community and to turn their attention back to the local agenda, almost every effort that has been made through this work has led to results, and in some cases, quite significant results. Even when it looks like we lost, it turns out to be a win for us. So you can't see this letter from Aurelia, for instance, but this is an example of what we're talking about here. That letter is the group from Aurelia put in a request to speak about ICLEI. And they received an official letter from the city of Aurelia, which stated that their deputation was denied because the corporation of the city of Aurelia now considers its decision making under the broad umbrella of the United Nations directives. Why? Because Justin Trudeau is aiming for Agenda 2030. And if they had any further questions, they should reach out to their local NGO, Sustainable Aurelia. Fascinating. So of course we've saved this letter and now share it with councils across the country. We didn't vote for this, right? At what point is it okay to deny our deputations because you consider your decision making under the UN's directives? Anyway, we've had so many examples, and I've been sharing them out and just really encouraging people with everything I've been sharing. I write articles quite often on the KICLEI Substack, and those are designed to be essentially they're reports to counselors. So instead of just letting ICLEI and these organizations be the only ones who are putting reports in front of our counselors on these matters, now they're starting to get reports from our side, well-researched, well-referenced reports. And I encourage everyone to take that information, repurpose it, use it, put it into your own words, perpetuate the truth that you see within those reports. And I believe, and I'm that is all rooted in common sense. It's not my reports and my arguments aren't designed to be overcomplicated. And I do my best to keep everything as simple as possible and so that it can be shared. One of the points that I like to make is the impact of 30 years of sustainable development. I actually just sent a lengthy response to the council in Simcoe County, and I'll tell you a little bit about what's been happening over there and hope that it'll inspire your work as well. But in it, I made the point, where are these sustainable, resilient communities that we were promised? After 30 years, what do we see? We see, yeah, you can have one. We see a housing shortage, an affordability crisis. We see a mental health crisis, which is related to the lack of affordable housing and economic insecurities in our country. We see our farmers facing restrictive regulations and rural residents being restricted off of their land, essentially. We see energy costs skyrocketing, local businesses being overregulated and eventually replaced with international franchises. We see our local industries being purchased by foreign corporations only to be shut down or completely restructured. Where are the resilient, sustainable communities? Because I've just watched over my lifetime all the small towns of this country slowly get downgraded, at least by one classification. They've either gone from a small town to a village, or a village to a hamlet, or they've gone all the way down to a damn ghost town, right? I'm not seeing the sustainable communities, and all I'm seeing in the urban areas are tent cities popping up everywhere. So I don't believe sustainable development is working for us. Okay, we're getting close. So just if you have any questions, I'm looking forward to help answer those. But we've seen, like I said, results with this work, and it's only started about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years now that we started. Since we first said the word KICLEI in a town council until now. We've identified key programs that are bringing this agenda in, namely the Partners for Climate Protection Program and anything coming from the FCM. And I'm sure that there's a lot more, and they're not hard to find once you know what to look for. And identifying those joining resolutions is the key, because then you can know what to aim for when you're advocating to withdraw from the program that's bringing these policies in. So we've identified those in multiple municipalities. We've learned how to do that so we can teach others how to do that too. We've delayed and prevented new commitments, new official plans, strategic plans, and from the PCP program moving forward in different municipalities, including Peterborough, where I'm from, and the county. We've helped councils to withdraw from this program, these programs, for the first time in Canadian history. We actually now are just watching rural counties in Canada, without our direct advocacy, withdrawing from the FCM entirely and notifying the rest of the rural councils across Canada that they are looking for a unified stance of rural municipalities to withdraw from this organization entirely. And we're empowering local groups and individuals to take action. So we've been having a lot of fun with this, because it seems like the first time that we've really found something that we can do in our communities and in our backyards to throw a wrench in the United Nations agenda. And I think that that is one of the most satisfying things that I could be doing with my with my time at this point in my life. So what can we do? What are the next steps? And this is where it gets fun. So I don't want anyone to get overwhelmed when you read this. You know, when we need to start investigating what's happening in our own municipalities, and determine in what way they are involved, to what extent. Now, there's a lot of ways that you can go about this, and and on my website, which I will pull up in a minute, I'm going to show you some tools that you can use so you can start investigating your municipality and putting together local engagement strategies. We want to start engaging. We want to start having conversations with our local representatives, and pulling all that information together so that we have our local representatives' contact information, so that we can start sharing with them information. We want to start educating our communities like we're doing today, and sharing our research and attending the council meetings and raising public awareness, you know, doing press releases, starting just to get involved in that area of raising awareness. And then we want to start organizing and mobilizing people to speak out in council, to do delegations, to present our petitions, and to have community meetings about this. Because ultimately, we want to push our councils to reconsider these programs and withdraw. And it is not impossible. So there's lots of ways to get involved. I would recommend joining KICLEI Canada's through our intake form. That's the best form to fill out. We also have a petition you can sign and a survey you can do, which really helps as well. And I recommend passing that or the links to that petition and survey around your community, because that's what councils need to see from us. We have big organizations like the Council of Canadians going around to our communities with their $6 million budget. I'll be fair. Gathering 500 signatures from our community calling for climate protection, environmental protection and climate resilience. And then they're sneaking this mitigation, net zero stuff into that. Essentially, they are doing the work. And if we want to win, we need to do the work too. So if they've gathered 500 signatures and presented that to council and asked them to make a climate action plan, we need 500 signatures to go in there and say, well, we want local environmental stewardship and we'd like you to withdraw from the Partners for Climate Protection program, for instance. Or they'll do a survey, right? And they'll present the survey to council. And this is data that they're relying on and getting the council to rely on, so that the council can, moving forward, can say, well, we did a survey and the community wanted environmental protection. Well, on our survey, we also give the respondents an option to choose environmental protection, but we make it more clear about what it is that they're actually endorsing. So are they endorsing tree planting programs? Do they like hazardous waste drop-offs? Are they looking for more support with climate community gardens? We lay it out there, the variety of different environmental stewardship initiatives that a community can take on, and then beside it we'll have the net zero initiatives, right? So it sorry, so we can present to the councils clearly what it is that the community is actually looking for them to do. And then, of course, start attending meetings, speaking out. Most of your meetings are online. Your councils likely have a YouTube channel. So all great ways that you can, when you see something that seems like it needs to be addressed, I recommend getting involved in saying something. Now, I know that we're close to the end of the hour. I will say that that there is a way to approach councils that will get results. So at KICLEI, we also have a code of conduct, and this seems to be working really well for us. So we are maintaining respectful dialogue with our councillors. We are looking for the councillors that are willing to engage and giving them our support, our time, our information. Those that are pushing this program, we are responding to them politely, but also using that as an opportunity to educate the rest of the council and showcase the lack of integrity within the responses that those pushing it are giving. So we're not doing personal attacks. We're not creating disruptions necessarily. We want to avoid that, because I knew from the very beginning that this could easily be that there could be some bad actors that would, not even bad actors, either bad actors or people who are not in not yet having an awareness of the best way to approach council, that would be used against us. The media will take anything they can and try and paint this work as extremism or disruptive. So that's why KICLEI has a code of conduct, and you can read that online as well. And lastly, I just wanted to show you the site map of KICLEI Canada. So this is our website. If you haven't seen it yet, there's the join us form here. The take action area is where you can see our petition survey. We have a letter writing campaign set up. There's an advocacy package on the FCM, so you can start sending reports and information to your councils about the FCM and get them to withdraw from that, and the Partners for Climate Protection Program and get them to withdraw from that. And then at the bottom here, oh, and there's a declaration. So if you want to read that for inspiration, I recommend it. There's our FCM package link. I'll be traveling to Alberta soon, looking forward to that. The PCP link. We have reports for British Columbia, Alberta, and Ontario. I'm working on the rest, but there is information under each provincial page now. And we'll be doing provincial Zoom meetings coming up. All my articles are listed here, and we'll have an archive. So there's lots of great information you can keep up on. And then the sitemap is where you can kind of get a broad overview of this work and how to take action, how to get involved. And when we talk about the strategy and how to respond to our councils, this is some really great information. People email me all the time and say, I've seen this article, and they'll post a link and they'll say, I don't know what to do about it, or they'll send something to me that's on their council's agenda, and they'll link to that and what their concerns are with that. And I'm trying to just give everyone the tools that will help them. So I've created my own chat GPT, and I don't know if you know much about chat GPT, but you can create your own. And I basically inputted into it what my mission is with KICLEI, what my main talking points are, what my main concerns are with the programs, my main arguments against their rationales, and created that as a resource. So if people click on the Canadian Civic Advisor, it'll take you to my personal chat GPT, and people can start to ask those questions directly to that. And it's going to start giving you some really great feedback that, of course, you need to verify, but you can ask it a lot of the questions that you ask me, you can ask that, and you're going to just find a ton of information. And then I also laid out my strategy. So a three-phase strategy. So gathering essential documents, laying out the board so you get a good idea of the structure of your municipality. Are you upper tier, lower tier? Are you a township? Are you a county? Are you a city? What does that mean? And then figure out where it is these joining resolutions were adopted. So in Simcoe County, it's at the county level. That means that we need to advocate all across the county, but direct our focus to withdrawing them at that county level, right? So all that is important. Build, it can help. This chat GPT, along with the websites that it takes you to, will allow you to get all of your local press contacts with the click of a button. It'll get you to consolidate all of your contacts for your local councilors, all the other local advocacy groups, all sorts of information on your county or your community's involvement in these climate action plans. What milestone are they on? What news articles has this been written about? It'll help you to investigate that information. And then once you have all that information, you can ask it to draft a report for you. You can find a local newspaper article that you've read that you have concerns with. You can type in your concerns, paste in the article, and ask it to help you draft an open letter to your council or an open letter to the editor. And obviously you can edit it from there, but it's a great tool in this age that we're in, where it's an information war and we need to fight back with words and this is acting as an editor and an assistant in that regard. Once you have, laid out your arguments or copy and pasted mine, you can ask it to do resolutions for your council, because that's what the international lobbyists are doing. They're putting a report in front of council, giving them the resolution that they want them to pass, and nobody's been there to push back and oppose it. And like I said, just a little bit of pushback is having results. So I think I'm going to leave it there for now, Gary, and I'm sure we can cover more, and I'll stay with the group for the next 25 minutes or so if you don't need to wrap up right away.
Well, I have some questions to ask. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Good. Do you find that the municipalities are totally ignorant to what's going on with the United Nations agenda?
Yes. Yeah, I can share countless stories where, we've pointed out that they were signed up with, say, the Partners for Climate Protection Program, and partnered with KICLEI, and the councils have no idea who KICLEI is. They've never heard of KICLEI.
That's disturbing.
Yeah, that's just one example of that. But, and this is why bringing information forward to them is so impactful, because it's like gotcha moment after gotcha moment, and it makes the people pushing the programs, it shines a light on their deception, really. So
Yeah. And do you usually, when you go to these council meetings, do you take groups of people with you just to show the support in the community?
yes, and we tend to do petitions, or usually what we'll do is a petition or a statement of support, because we have specific recommendations for the council. And so we will gather that on paper. So we have, 60 to 200 signatures on something. And that way we can mention that in our presentation as well. And if there are members from the community with us, it really adds to that. It changes the dynamic in the council room, because you're there in physical reality, standing in front of them. You can read their faces. They are not used to seeing people come to their council meetings. Most councils have been sitting with very little real civic engagement for a very long time. So it makes a really big difference when we show up. And showing up in person shows dedication. People are taking time out of their day to go there. And you can just imagine, if you were a counselor, right? If all of a sudden the council room is full, you're going to sit up a little straighter and be like, what's on the agenda today that brought these people in? What are they here about? Right? And then what we want them to see is clear recommendations. Like, we want to be super clear about what it is that we're doing there, not just giving an emotional speech, not just complaining, but actually presenting, you signed up for this program, it's having this impact, you're spending this much money, you haven't done a cost analysis on how much this is going to cost. We put one together. It looks like you couldn't do this program for under $8 million if you tried. Could you do a cost analysis and find out how much it is you've spent already? Because we'd really like to see that. And how much will it cost to get to net zero by 2050? Because you haven't let us know ahead of time, right? And why hasn't the PCP done it? Because they should have 30 years of data at this point. So, our arguments are just getting better and better when it comes to that.
Yeah, I think the whole thing is just a big hoax in my mind, because you look at the amount of trees and what the carbon they need just to, absorb, and we're at 0.4. If it goes down to 0.2, as I often say, plant life starts dying. And And in this area, something I want to bring up, in Owen Sound area, we've had big companies that have left this area. We become retirement community, and most of the people with trades have left this area, and the population is changing to a non-working population in this part of the country here, and it's even getting hard to find jobs here. You have to go to the major cities because of what's going on with their climate agenda changes.
Yes.
All
Yeah,
right, I have a couple questions, Maggie.
Hi, Tina. Yes, go ahead.
Well, I'd like to mention I have two big front trees on my front yard, and they both died fast this past summer. But my questions, two questions. If a council refuses your attendance to do a delegation, how do you get past that? And the second question is, how many councils do you think you've reached out to in your past 2 or 3 years of awesome work?
So your first question,
How do you get past them like Aurelia to be able to make a delegation?
so there's a couple things that you can try. What was happening with Aurelia, I think we were just starting to do this work, right? So when we were putting in deputation requests, we might have been a bit too, we might have given too much information in our deputation request. At that time, we didn't have the joining resolution, right? We hadn't found that yet. So I find the joining resolution is a big key to getting on on as a delegate, because what they do have procedural bylaws, and they say, well, if it's outside of our jurisdiction, we're not going to hear it, right? So when we put in, we want to talk about the United Nations, they're like, well, that's outside of our jurisdiction. Because
So they
again,
think.
so they think. So then we show them that we're relating it back to the joining resolution where they signed up for the UN directive program, right? And then that we're talking about their what can we say? We want to speak on their new smart city tech that they're bringing in, right? And so that's on their agenda. They're going to be discussing this on their agenda. And then we're going to speak to that agenda item. And we're going to tie it into the fact that they've signed up for this data collection program. And then we're going to ask them how much money, like we're going to then bring our concerns with the program. And then we're going to recommend that they do a cost analysis and withdraw. Right. So that joining resolution was the key. And then your other question, how many have we reached? So I think it's hard to say 100% how many we've reached, but we put together a database of all of the emails for all the counselors across the country that are on municipal council, signed up for the Partners for Climate Protection program. We've also so my KICLEI newsletter is going to all of them.
So you've reached everybody. It's just a matter of if they've woke up.
And it's a matter of, them receiving the information in their inbox is one thing.
And paying it. Yeah.
Them getting that information sent to them a second or third time from various residents forwarding that on to them, then it starts to get more personal. Then residents, looking at their local news and local agenda and starting to make the connections, putting that together in a little report, and then showing them a mini report on their municipality's involvement with evidence of the joining resolutions. Now then we're starting to lay the crumbs out for them, right? We're starting to show them, okay, here's the joining resolution, guys. This is like, there are counselors across this country who want to do this, but then they also need our public support, right? They need us to go out there and do the work, gather those signatures,
And this is what the people want.
And show up and be polite and professional so that they can say, yep, I'll move that motion. And they won't have any issues attached to it because we're not going to be presenting over the top. We don't need to go over the top in order to get their buy-in. We just need them to get out of the program.
And over
Right?
the top means talking about them taking away our chickens and our cows, like that's over the top, but that's the end result.
You know, it depends on how it's presented, right? I think in some communities that wouldn't be over the top, right? But I found, for instance, like one example, if I go in there and I say, you signed up for Agenda 21, their mind goes, this is a conspiracy theory. If I use the wording like they had in the letter to Aurelia, I'm going to use their own wording. I'm going to call it a UN directive program. And then all of a sudden, it doesn't make them turn off, right?
Yes.
So
Yep.
we want to make sure we curate our words so that we're not pushing them away before we even get into our recommendation.
Perfect.
Thanks.
You do great work.
Thanks.
Yes, I'm also hoping that other communities can work together as well to what works for them and what doesn't work for them. We can share our experiences together on moving forward with this. So, wherever you're from, everybody's from on here, I think it's a good idea that we all stay in touch with each other and, learn how to push back on our municipalities the best way we can.
Well, we just stopped wind turbines coming in our little township, and I work in Wilmot where they've got that big fight going on, and I say a third of the properties have a sign to save our farmlands. Like, it's a big thing going on.
A lot of small farms in this area here have disappeared. The only farms that are surviving are the big cash crop farms, but your normal 100 to 400 acre farms are disappearing.
Yes.
Regulations.
And that is, each of these issues needs investigation. It needs to pull together the experts, people who are involved in the agriculture industry, the farming associations and everything too, right? We need to really get it from their perspective because I know I can have my opinion about it and I'm probably half right, but we want to talk to the farmers and the association so that we can advocate for them. What bothers me is you can't be a small farmer anymore, right? And actually get ahead, and it's too bad. So looking for policies that could protect small farms would be fantastic.
Yeah, mine now is pretty cool. If I was going here, I mean, I haven't stumbled with it.
Now I can't hear Ellen. I hear Ellen. I think. Go ahead.
It seems the beard always goes first.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. What kind of questions would you put on the survey, for instance, that you want to take to your counselors to show that you've surveyed people? What questions would you ask?
So there's a survey on KICLEI on our website.
Okay.
And I guess I'm not sharing. Hold on one second. So I can share it or I can just read it here. I'll put it in the chat though. So what I asked was, are they aware of the program? So does the community know what the Partners for Climate Protection program is? Do you think that they know what it is? Right?
Probably not.
Probably not. Like if this is, I'm just going to share the screen. If this is our first time, some of our first time hearing about it, right? It's likely that they don't know what it is. So that right there, if we can show the council that the community isn't even aware of what the PCP program is, that means that they haven't done their job in getting in signing up for a program that the community doesn't know anything about. Sorry, I didn't say that very good, but where did you hear about the PCP program or climate action plan? Concerns about climate action plan. So the privacy and data collection, the
That actually
financial
pushes
impact,
this.
No, I don't know if you can hear me.
local control and autonomy. So I would just refer to the one that is here. So I kind of listed all my main concerns, the impact on housing, energy security, corporate influence, urban bias. And then I asked them to pick their top 3 community priorities. And so I listed, I don't know if you can see very well, I listed responsibilities that typically fall under a municipal council. So housing, economic development, infrastructure, public safety, agriculture and food security, education, youth programs, transparency and accountability. And then I separated environmental stewardship from sustainable development and CO2 reductions. So in this way, when the community picks its top 3 priorities, so mine would probably be economic development, support for agriculture, transparency and accountability. So if they get a whole bunch of surveys coming in and this last one isn't checked, sustainable development and CO2 reduction, then that means that the strategic plan, the 5-year plan for the council, and the official plan, the 25-year plan for the municipality, should not have net zero on every single page of it. It should not be a plan that is 100% pushing sustainable development and CO2 reduction, right? If it's not a community priority, if everyone's picking actual municipal priorities and not picking this extra voluntary one, then our official plans should eventually stop being based on net zero. But we need to show them that. We need to show them it's not a priority so that they stop making official plans. I don't know if you've looked at an official plan recently, but the one that was just proposed in Brandon is probably a good example of what most of our official plans look like. And almost every page of it was about net zero. And that wouldn't have happened if the community, well, they did a great job. They went in and they spoke out against it and they filled the room. But if they had a survey showing that the community didn't want it on top of it, then they would have really, utilized a really powerful tool in the civic engagement toolbox. And then there's a few other things on here as well. So I ask also, would you support or oppose the council reconsidering participation in favor of locally driven environmental strategies? So, yeah.
So last year, in the newspaper, I kept seeing notices posted saying that the county had received an application, didn't say from who, for resolutions for general housekeeping resolutions and to update the official plan to adhere to provincial and other entity requirements. And
Right.
that just rang really bad.
Once you start knowing what to look for and everything, I will print these out and I'll start just highlighting and I'll go through and I'll see if I'm right. And then I'll just start sharing, journaling my thoughts essentially on it, and then I'll turn that into information that I want to be shared with the council. And I really recommend anytime that we communicate with our councils or each other, that we do so in professional language, that we take the time to edit it. So that is readable. Basic stuff like that will go a long way. And it's surprising to see how much of our advocacy communication could really use improvement when it comes to how it's formatted. Not a reference to you, Tina,
Presentation.
just, pardon?
Presentation.
Yeah.
Facts, not emotions.
Yes. So I think I'm going to end the recording section, and then if people want to ask any questions more freely, they can. But I just did want to thank everyone for coming. And I see some names in the chat there. It's so great to have you all here. And if people have questions about this moving forward, feel free to reach out to me. Probably the best way to reach me is info@KICLEI.ca. And there are all sorts of tools and ways to get involved on the website. Check out the sitemap and you should have a good overview from there. So I will post a recording of this on the KICLEI Canada YouTube channel.
Thank you for